Thank you. It's great to be here this morning and have the opportunity to speak with you. How many folks, just show of hands, how many folks in the audience have cybersecurity as their primary or sole responsibility versus a broader set of IT and technology issues? Show of hands. All right. It's a small number of focused security experts. So how do I set the stage for what's going to be an awesome dialogue today around technology issues and a lot of dialogue around cyber? Maybe I can start off with a little bit of cyber psychology. For those of you that don't spend a lot of time in cyber, you don't experience the schizophrenia that we experience. It drives you to multiple personalities. I mean, Mondays and Wednesdays are uplifting and optimistic, and all sorts of great things are happening and innovation occurring in our industry. And Tuesdays and Thursdays are thoroughly depressing. Fridays, some massive hack or breach happens, crisis du jour on Fridays. For some reason, it always happens Friday afternoons. Let me give you an example here. It reminds me a lot of like the optimist and the pessimist who go fishing. And they're out, it's a beautiful day, beautiful October day, mid-80s, kind of like it is today. And the optimist and the pessimist decide they're going to go out fishing. Out fishing, having a great time. And the wind blows and knocks the optimist's hat into the lake. And, of course, they brought their trusty dog Rover with them. Nobody goes fishing without Rover. Rover looks up, sees the hat, jumps out of the boat, goes running on top of the water, grabs the hat, turns around and brings it back and gives the hat back to the optimist. And the optimist says, "Holy smokes, did you see that? See that? Rover can walk on water." And the pessimist says, "Yeah, it's only because he doesn't know how to swim." And being in cyber is a lot like that, right? Sometimes we feel like we're making a lot of progress, and at other times, it seems like we're being outpaced by our adversaries and a lot of the challenges that the CIOs and the organizations we support throw our way. And so we need to change our perspective on what's happening in the cyber domain. Let me give you an example of a change in perspectives and how powerful it can be if it causes you to change your action. Anybody know who Dick Fosbury is? We've got a handful of folks. Dick Fosbury was a U.S. high jumper in the mid-'60s. And candidly, he was pretty terrible. I mean, he stunk. And Dick Fosbury actually admitted in one interview, he said that he was the worst high jumper in his club. But right around the time when he was in high school, mid-'60s, they started coming out with those cushy foam mats that exist and that we see and know that occur in the high jumping world. And before that, they used to use sawdust pits. And when you had a hard sawdust pit, you had to limit your techniques for high jumping to ones where you could land on your feet. They used to do this thing called the Western roll. Well, Dick Fosbury started thinking about a new piece of technology, this foam mat, a change in the environment and the variables, and started thinking out of the box with a different perspective. What can I do differently if I don't have to land on my feet? This thing's pretty cushy. I'm not going to get hurt. I can land on my back. And he started a new technique where he threw himself over the bar head first and landed on his back. It allowed him to spread out his center of gravity and achieve a higher hang time and get over much higher heights. And people didn't understand it. They made fun of him. Right up until the 1968 Olympics when he won the gold. And to this day, that technique is known as the Fosbury flop. And people have been refining it and optimizing it. But Dick was the first one to do it because there was a new piece of technology that was available to everyone, but he thought differently about his challenges and how he could leverage that technology. And I think if you look at the world of cyber, that's very much the challenge that we have in front of us. It isn't necessarily a technology one, it's a one of perspective. What we're doing as an industry doesn't work. Day in, day out, week in, week out, we see catastrophic failures in the cyber domain. And our challenges are only going to get worse. At least that's the way things appear at the outset, right? You look at what's occurring in the IoT world, in the automation of our environments beyond traditional technologies. Look at what's occurred in the mobile world. Look at what's occurring in the cloud world. Right? All of these technology trends, which we can't avoid as security professionals, right? We're taught to be suspicious of new technologies. We don't have a choice. Our organizations are embracing these new technologies because they make our organizations more efficient. We can deliver better capabilities and services to our customers. We can do new things with these new technologies. But if we're having a hard time securing our traditional environments, which aren't going away, I don't know of a single organization today that's cloud only. So we have this legacy environment, which many times includes mainframes and mini computers and real legacy stuff. We've got our LAN and client server architectures, which aren't going away, not anytime soon. And now we have these mobile and cloud and SaaS and app-based virtual infrastructure environments. And our job as security professionals is to be able to secure this rapidly expanding attack surface. And our adversaries are getting more sophisticated. And I'm sure many of you get intel briefs on a regular basis, or even get intel out of the private sector about how the adversaries are evolving. And make no mistake, while many are reporting a reduction in the volume of attacks, these attacks and our adversaries are not going away. They're evolving their techniques, they're becoming stealthier and more sophisticated. And the number of sophisticated adversaries is rapidly expanding. So we've got a very significant challenge in front of us, securing our traditional environments and our new environments, and our threat environments are getting more sophisticated too. So we've got some real challenges. We've got to change our perspective if we're going to be successful. Talk for a minute about some new capabilities, or at least the changes in these environments and what it means, and some of the things that we can do to better protect ourselves. First, realize your traditional perimeters are going away. Some would argue they have gone away. But we can't rely on these traditional security paradigms. Connectivity with cloud providers, with virtual infrastructures, with business partners, with suppliers. A more rapidly changing workforce of employees and contractors and people we interact with. More open engagement with our customers and the people we service. Right? All of this and the architectures and the technologies we use mean that our traditional perimeter concepts are going to be less effective, if you can imagine that, than they were in years past. We've got to move beyond the perimeter. We've got to move beyond knowing what attack patterns look like in order to detect or protect them. Right? The concept of an IDS or signature-based antivirus are almost entirely useless in today's threat environment. Right? Our adversaries are using new exploit methodologies. So how can you rely on a signature-based method where you know what an attack pattern looks like to protect or detect yourself? You can't. And then we've also relied on SIMs, right? These glorious pieces of technology which aggregate the alerts coming out of our IDSs and firewalls to somehow magically detect when a sophisticated attack happens, to give us visibility into the environment. By definition, it can't. It's relying on the signature-based approaches and the blind telemetry to formulate its opinion. Which is why when you look at things like the Verizon Data Breach Report, it would tell you that less than 1% of the advanced threat breaches that they investigated were detected using the SIM, even though it may take up the lion's share of your security budget. So we've got to change, because the technology landscape is changing and our adversaries are changing and evolving, we've got to change how we're doing things. One opportunity or requirement going forward is in the world of identity. Right? At some point in the kill chain, at some point in the attack life cycle, our adversaries, because they've evolved, it's not about a piece of malware, it's not about a specific exploit or network attack or a single 0 day, they're after us. They want to get into our organizations. They want to get the sensitive data, the information, the plans. And when someone is a focused adversary, they're going to use and they're going to evolve to use attack campaigns. And as part of that attack campaign, at some point in the exploit, when they get into a system, or when they spearfish an executive or a systems administrator, they're going to use elevated privileges in order to get to the information or onto the systems or move laterally within your organization to get to the data that's most interesting to them. So one opportunity for success going forward is to improve what we're doing in the world of authentication and identity and access management. Right? The identities, if you can get rid of passwords, if you can force better hygiene from an authentication perspective, if you can better govern what your users have access to, and deprovision over-escalated accesses that they don't need, you're going to stand a much better chance and raise the bar for our adversaries. Another opportunity is in the world of visibility. Right? Look at what's happening in your environment holistically. Point solutions that are just looking at detecting malware in a sandbox, or detecting malware or exploits on the network, or detecting compromises of a system in isolation are going to be ineffective at helping you identify an attack campaign. You need that sort of pervasive visibility. And these new technologies and these new approaches are the path forward. Right? It's not about a single exploit or a single piece of malware. That's not an advanced threat strategy. So you have to think differently about how you monitor your environment and how you live in this world where focused adversaries are using orchestrated campaigns against you. And you have to change your security strategy as a result. And identity plays an increasingly critical role in visibility. Your security operations need to know when identities are being abused. When systems accounts are running around connecting to other systems in the internal environment in ways that they shouldn't. Right? This new paradigm, connecting of identity to visibility and broad security operations, is incredibly important. Another incredibly important opportunity is connecting mission to what the security teams are doing. Business context. Right? We don't have, right, as a security professional and as a CIO, I'm sure you guys here, we need more. Can't get enough security budget. And security budgets are increasing, even in an era where IT budgets are not. But even still, we can't defend everything. So we need to know what's critical. What is mission critical to the organization? What is the most sensitive data? Who are the critical folks that are required for the mission or that are going to get exploited because of their access or because of the data that they review? And we need to be able to make sure that we prioritize our limited resources on the things that can be most impactful to the organization. This is what we're starting to call business-driven security. Get the security team, the bits and the bytes matter, but you need to get the security program out of the bits and bytes and speaking the language of the enterprise. Focusing on mission. And knowing what's important evolves, right? Years ago, it was simply the transaction systems. Today, it's not. When you look at what's happening with WikiLeaks and some of the hacktivism activities, right, your attack surface might not be the same thing that you thought it was a few years ago. And it's not only because you're embracing new technologies, it's because our adversaries are going after different data sets that we didn't expect to have incredible value or be incredibly sensitive. So we need to think about how we can manage risk differently from a business context. There's a couple of opportunities and things that are specific to the federal security world that I wanted to highlight or at least mention to you. First is, from a policy perspective, we need clarity, and I don't think it exists today. Clarity between how the government is organizing, what the roles and responsibilities and authorities are from a federal perspective across the intel agencies, Defense Department, law enforcement agencies, and the sector-specific agencies delivering services across the nation. And it's incredibly important in the cyber domain because the objectives of these organizations are not always aligned. In fact, there's inherent mission conflict between what an intel agency might see and observe and how they might want to continue to observe or not based on what's occurring. And their perspective might vary from law enforcement, which is ultimately focused on prosecution of a crime. And both of them might vary significantly from folks trying to protect critical infrastructures or simply defend a database that is critical to their mission. And they might not care who's doing it and what techniques they're evolving to. They're ultimately concerned about how they protect their information. Ongoing monitoring is far less important to them. So we need much better clarity from a policy perspective across the federal government, the roles and responsibilities and authorities. And this has significant impact on things like encryption policy, right? We saw some, and continue to see, some terrifying proposals around national encryption policy, right? Which would have devastating impact to those trying to defend technology environments. We're already behind in the cyber arms race. And now to further weaken the protections, the fundamental building blocks of protections available to us, I think would be a catastrophic mistake. And not to mention decrease the competitiveness of U.S. economic interests around the world. So significant debate and dialogue still needs to occur before moving forward with a number of these policies. And there's a number of areas where the federal government's leading the way and impacting the private sector. If you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, right, incredible stuff, adding incredible value, helping organizations in the private sector embrace what has been created in a collaborative effort with the help of the Department of Commerce. And it's really being embraced across the private sector. I can't tell you how impactful this is for boards of directors and organizations trying to better manage cyber risk. Things like FedRAMP, right? Might sound or feel painful at the outset, but it's driving security requirements into the next generation of infrastructure and making sure that those security requirements are available not only to you, the federal customers, but ultimately to all the critical infrastructures and to the rest of the customers that these organizations service. It's incredibly powerful and it's incredibly important. I see I'm out of time, but before I leave, I wanted to share one more thought with you. I've been in the security world for about almost 25 years now. I know, it's really depressing. But, and most of that work, in case you couldn't tell, it's a Tuesday and I'm incredibly pessimistic. Most of that work has been in the hardcore incident response side of the equation, calling organizations or engaging with them in the middle of the night or in some crisis moment and helping them come to grips with the ugly reality that is the cyber world, the reality of the cyber world. And it isn't a pleasant conversation in most instances. But for those of you that are working in cyber or helping to balance and manage risk for your organization, I wanted to personally thank you and remind you that the work that we do and the work that you do matters each and every day. It matters to your departments and agencies, and the organizations you serve. It matters to your customers. It matters to your families. It matters to the nation. You're not only protecting IT environments, you're helping and assuring that our government can continue to operate and deliver critical services to our citizens. It's incredibly important. And the work that you do matters because the way you do it also leads the way for the private sector. The requirements that you define, the ways you manage risk, right? Those all work their way into the vendor community. And ultimately, those capabilities become available to the private sector and help them better protect the critical infrastructures and our economy and our way of life. And if we aren't successful together in cyber, none of humanity's potential for the future is possible. All these great things that we can imagine and that we see happening in the world of nano and biotech, the world of space and transportation, right? None of these advances, none of the promise for humanity's future is possible without us being successful in cyber. Many of you struggle with regulatory compliance regimes and leadership that doesn't understand that there's a difference, a profound difference, between meeting your compliance objectives and managing risk or being secure. And it's got to be incredibly frustrating. And the only thing I can do is tell you not to give up and don't get discouraged and keep fighting that fight, because the work that you do matters every single day. We have to get this right. Thank you.